Today, you will know the new universal history, alternative, Genesis reinterpreted, where Sumeria Mesopotamia is the connection with our true prehistory.
The new alternative history for the traditional universal history. A new history synchronized with ancient religious and ancestral texts. And also synchronized with the current advanced level of scientific knowledge. A new universal history, much more coherent. And a new universal history with fewer inconsistencies. Let's know the new universal history, alternative, Genesis reinterpreted.
The topics we will cover in this video include the following three aspects. First, the parameters by which official or traditional universal history has been formed. Second, the parameters that are increasingly reviewed and questioned by contemporary historians and archaeologists. Third, proposal of an alternative universal history that answers these questions. Let's begin with the first topic.
Mesopotamia, which from its Greek roots means in the middle of rivers, is the name by which the area of the Near East located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers has been known since it was conquered by Alexander the Great, 330 BC. It extends to the fertile areas adjacent to the strip between both rivers and which coincides approximately with the non-desert areas of present-day Iraq and the bordering area of northeastern Syria. This region had been known by different names and had different meanings depending on the best-known peoples who had occupied it before, such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Persians, or later, such as the Muslims.
Following the dictates of the powerful Second British Empire, traditional Western archaeology was born in the first half of the 19th century, basing its knowledge of the events of humanity's past solely on the descriptions contained in the Judeo-Christian Bible, which was the oldest known text, and under the premise that the entire set of biblical stories were in fact historical references. Therefore, the following explorations were oriented towards the discovery in the Mesopotamia region of the sites of the cities mentioned there, giving rise to what is known as biblical archaeology, or the discipline that deals with the recovery and scientific research of the material remains of past cultures that can illuminate the periods and descriptions of the Bible, with a time span that included between the year 2000 BC and the year 100 AD. The appearance of man on earth, according to widely held religious beliefs and supported by drawing historical conclusions from the descriptions and teachings of the Bible, was set within a limited time frame of about 6,000 years ago.
The above parameters formed archaeology and consequently the official universal history of the British Empire, which led to the official history of today's Western civilization. British and French archaeologists located and explored sites such as Nineveh, Nimrud, the capital of Assyria during the reign of Ashurbanipal II in the 9th century, and Khorsabad, the capital during the reign of Sargon II in the 8th century BC. Their discoveries, such as the Palace of Nineveh and the Palace of Sennacherib, the Library of Ashurbanipal and the Palace of Sargon II, generated great interest in Mesopotamian archaeology. In the southern area, new cities began to be discovered, such as Uruk, Susa, Uara and Larsa, although it was only from 1875 onwards that evidence of the existence of the Sumerian civilization was found, confirmed by fundamental excavations, in Uar, 1922 and 1934, one of the oldest city-states in Sumeria.
Work was also carried out at the famous site of Babylon, whose foundation dates back to the Akkadian period. In the 3rd millennium BC, it had its first period of prosperity under the reign of Hammurabi, until 1750 BC, and then its second period of prosperity under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II until 562 BC. A key discovery was the so-called Behistun inscription, a monumental stone work from the Achaemenid period, 6th century BC, built into the face of a cliff and including 3 versions of the same text, a essentially a proclamation of the exploits of Darius I of Persia.
This large mural contains cuneiform writing in 3 different languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, and is illustrated with carved images of the ruler with other figures present. The British officer Henry Creswit, an expert on the Old Persian text, was able to translate the Old Persian cuneiform text in 1838, and the Elamite and Babylonian texts were translated by himself and other colleagues after 1843, which helped in the understanding of these dead languages.
This Behistun inscription to cuneiform writing, what the Rosetta Stone means to Egyptian hieroglyphics. Its decipherment paved the way for the knowledge of the oldest stories, recorded with a writing system that until then was strange and incomprehensible, but that later became known as cuneiform, which led to the final identification of the basis of the Sumerian language, a non-Semitic language like Arabic, Hebrew, or Aramaic and older than Akkadian, and therefore spoken before the 3rd millennium BC.
What do you think about the function of the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Behistun inscription for Sumerian writing? Please comment, and thank you for watching.
The oldest texts corresponding to the translations of thousands of cuneiform clay tablets found until today in the Sumerian region can be summarized as follows. First, the famous library of ancient texts, archived by King Ashurbanipal, which contained tens of thousands of inscribed baked clay tablets, which could be deciphered and translated from the Sumerian language thanks to the development of the Behistun inscription. This discovery opened the door for official academic historiography to begin considering Mesopotamia as the cradle of civilizations, as it was the region where the first Sumerian settlers developed the first permanent human settlements and later managed to occupy and establish themselves in the lower region of Mesopotamia, founding the first cities, Eridu, Uruk, Ur, and Nippur.
Second, cuneiform tablets with evidence of a tradition of sanctuary use for the gods dating back to the refounding of the city of Eridu around 5400 BC. Third, the Epic of Gilgamesh, 2500 to 2000 BC, is an Akkadian verse narrative about the adventures of King Gilgamesh. One episode in the poem recounts the first version of the Great Flood. Fourth, Atrahasis, 1650 BC, is a long poem that covers the origin of the world to the creation of man, including the causes of the flood, which the Epic of Gilgamesh does not mention. Fifth, the Sumerian king list, a list of kings from ancient Mesopotamia written in the Sumerian language engraved in cuneiform script that divides the kings into antediluvian and post-diluvian, including in the latter the kings of the 3rd dynasty of Uruk, known as the Sumerian Renaissance.
We now present the official traditional universal history.
The official traditional synchronous universal history.
It's a synchronized comparative presentation of historical events in 20 regions or civilizations.
The slides shown now correspond to a synchronous version of the official universal history, published on the culturahistorica.org website, from where you can download the Excel file directly to your computer by following the steps detailed at the end of this video.
This tool compiles the major events that shaped the world through successive civilizations, from the origins of humanity to the present day.
All these events have been strictly ordered and synchronized by date and organized in a large database designed to take advantage of Microsoft Excel's capabilities for data visualization and analysis, and also utilizes the powerful tools it offers for the tasks required to synchronize and compare events.
Going through the process of hominization, by which the current human genus, Homo sapiens, evolved around the year 200,000 BC. Then we find the beginning of the Metal Age, with the Copper Age producing the first use of a malleable but limited metal for tools, approximately between 6,500 to 3,000 BC. So we come to the end of our prehistory, or of the beginning of our history, which takes place around 4000 BC, when official history declares the emergence of the Uruk culture, an urban civilization in the Sumerian region.
In the explanatory slides shown now, for better visualization purposes, only 4 of the 20 regions that can be compared in the program are included. It can be observed, then, that although official history was born in the 19th century with a strictly creationist and religious approach, since the 20th century it has shifted to a modern scientific evolutionary approach, based on archaeological, and genetic evidence from Neo-Darwinian evolutionary theories and chronologies based on dating. On the other hand, although historical narrative continues to focus on events considered important, such as discoveries, wars, revolutions, rise and fall of empires, this new format of synchronous universal history manages to mitigate the influence of the Western model of time that uses the specific periodizations of prehistory, antiquity, Middle Ages, modern age, and contemporary age.
This model of specific periodizations, having its roots in European history, may not be uniformly applicable to all cultures, since it also has a disproportionate Eurocentric focus on the histories of Europe and its colonial extensions told from the perspective of nation-states. This aspect is also mitigated, although to a lesser extent, with the new synchronic model presented.
We now summarize the main inconsistencies and parameters most reviewed and questioned by contemporary historians and archaeologists of this official history.
Traditional archaeology and history, although fundamental to our understanding of the past, are not without inconsistencies, gaps, and debates.
First of all, these inconsistencies arise from the incomplete nature of the archaeological record in terms of the accuracy and synchronization of chronologies and dating.
In this regard, one of the main inconsistencies of official history arises when it categorically attributes to certain events mentioned in ancient texts the character of mythological or allegorical. In this way, it excludes from the prehistoric scope events, such as the existence of the first human generations created and possibly endowed with advanced technological capabilities, as well as the occurrence of the catastrophic event of the universal flood that destroyed those antediluvian civilizations. Likewise, as mentioned above, official history records evidence that prehistoric humans had a Metal Age, including a Copper Age between approximately the 7th and 3rd millennia BC, and an Iron Age, which ended around the beginning of the 1st millennium AD, both limited to producing only primitive tools. But at the same time, official history records that these same humans built large and complex structures during these time periods with those primitive tools and without the equipment that would be required in modern times.
From the above, it is clear, when reviewing all the slides of official history, that all the major events from the origins of humanity to the present day have been included, but events such as the existence of generations of humans created in the image and likeness of God, long before the Great Flood, have never been taken into account. This is amply documented in Genesis, in ancient texts, and in the oral traditions of many civilizations other than the Western one.
Secondly, the main inconsistencies in archaeology and traditional history regarding technological capabilities center on the difficulty of explaining certain achievements and artifacts of the past using only the technological knowledge attributed to those eras, as in the following cases. First, megalithic constructions at sites such as Giza, Stonehenge, Baalbek Saxe woman, Pumapunku and many others around the world great challenges arise, as the precision in cutting, transporting, and assembling enormous stone blocks, often with complex astronomical alignments, raises questions about the technology available in these prehistoric societies. Similarly, as an example of the inconsistencies due to the limitations of written sources and biases in interpretation, one can mention the function given to the pyramids as tombs, despite the new theories and discoveries found within them.
Second, advanced metallurgy, Damascus steel, orichalcum, Corinthian bronze, and flexible glass, vitrum flexile, among other alloys that have been difficult to replicate with modern technology. This suggests advanced metallurgical knowledge that is not always fully documented in traditional history.
Third, out-of-place artifacts parts. Some artifacts found in very ancient geological strata, predating the emergence of human metallurgy, generate controversy and challenge traditional technological chronology with evidence of unexplained energy or technologies, such as the Baghdad battery and the Antikythera mechanism.
Fourth, sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge, with precise astronomical alignments, complex calendars, and advanced mathematics.
Fifth, irrigation and water management systems with advanced technology. Ancient civilizations, such as the Indus Valley, the Inca civilization, and some Mesopotamian cultures, developed very complex irrigation systems, dams and canals, which required an understanding of hydraulics and precision in construction that exceeded the technological capabilities available in the construction periods assigned by official history.
Very good. Now we have the required context to stop talking about the inconsistencies and failures of the universal history we have been traditionally taught. No, now we are going to propose a better history that vindicates the beliefs in both sacred and ancient texts. We are going to propose now our new alternative synchronous universal history Genesis, version_reinterpreted.
To try to remedy all these inconsistencies, we can now present an alternative universal history based on the descriptions of the oldest known texts, revised and updated in accordance with our current level of archaeological and scientific knowledge. We call it Synchronic Universal History Alternative, Genesis Reinterpreted, since it takes into account the interpretation of the Judeo-Christian Bible, included both in the Tanakh, books of Genesis and Exodus of the Hebrew Bible, as well as in the adoption of these texts made in the Christian Old Testament, and in turn understanding these narratives as adaptations of the much older Sumerian texts. For this reinterpretation of sacred texts, the following aspects are taken into account.
First, the alternative we present departs from the classical evolutionary biology approach of official history. First, because the scientific debate is very open and questions whether Neo-Darwinian mechanisms are sufficient to explain, through random and probabilistic mutations, the generation of genes of irreducible complexity, such as those that regulate brain development in the human genome. Systems such as language or consciousness. They conclude that there was an external intervention, not necessarily divine, but certainly directed to endow DNA with these capacities. Second, this version aims to be more inclusive, considering that, although in secular countries creationism is marginal in academia, as in other non-secular countries, it can have more weight and persists in specific religious or educational settings. Taristosai, although science dominates academic discourse, the cultural debate remains open, and the broad religious majorities of societies quietly embrace theories that integrate both views, such as believers who accept evolution up to the point of intervention by a divine mechanism, or believers who accept scientific creation or intelligent design also as divine mechanisms. Third, due to the advanced level of scientific knowledge currently available about the characteristics of the Earth and its location in the solar system and the universe. A reinterpretation of the statements included in the first chapters of the Bible regarding the time elapsed for events and the methodology used for their execution is required. These statements were not intended to scientifically explain the origin of the universe or the appearance of humankind on Earth. Rather, they are literary expressions and symbols typical of the period in which these biblical texts were written. However, they invite us to recognize God as the sole creator and Lord of humankind, animals, and all things. Thus, the timescale expands considerably, from a few millennia to several billion years, but without affecting their historical and religious validity. Therefore, as shown in the slides, our prehistory begins with the creation of the universe, the Earth, and then humankind, and continues with subsequent events, as established in Genesis, but also according to the current advanced level of interpretation of the oldest texts known today, which correspond to the clay tablets of the Sumerian civilization, as well as the ancient documents of the civilizations of Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China.
As can be seen in the slide, this alternative makes it possible to accept and propose theories that were incredible and debatable before considering the great events that complete our prehistory according to ancient texts. Now these theories appear probable and necessary to explain events that current scientific knowledge cannot verify, such as the unions of humans with other beings, the appearance of gigantic beings, the construction of many antediluvian megalithic structures by generations of humans endowed with technical capabilities, and the intervention of so-called angelic beings or sons of God in many human events. Fourth, in this way, one can obtain a more realistic view of prehistory and with fewer inconsistencies than the current official prehistory. Although it is necessary to validate the following statements that until now were mythological, allegorical, and unconventional.
A. Although it is true that an infinite distance separates humans from God, especially for the generations of humans of ancient times, this distance was bridged by the intervention of angels or the sons of God, whose function was to be the messengers of divine knowledge, blessings, and punishments, and to present to the Lord the supplications and needs of humans.
B. The 8 human generations from Enos, son of Seth, called the foundation after his father Adam, are consistent with the reigns assigned to the last 8 kings before the flood in the Sumerian king list, ending with Zeusudra, the biblical Noah. These are the descendants of Adam, created by God in his image and endowed with some of his own genetics, but not with the essences of eternal life. This would mean that the lifespans of these kings, which seemed exaggerated, mythological, and impossible, could be perfectly feasible, and that these durations have been decreasing with distance from the creation date, reaching their current durations.
C. Furthermore, it is also possible that these generations had extensive contact with the angels or sons of Goddess is evident in both the Bible and the Sumerian texts. Thus, these generations could have been perfectly equipped with advanced technological capabilities sufficient to carry out many of the technologically advanced megalithic constructions that have been found or restored in recent centuries of the modern era, and which are impossible to attribute to humans of generations after the flood, since these technical capabilities were almost completely extinguished with the occurrence of that universal catastrophic event.
D. The occurrence of the catastrophic flood is a fact included, with minor variations, in all the world's oral and written traditions. In the present alternative version, the date of the event has been synchronized with other dates and durations of events detailed in the Sumerian texts, which is put forward for consideration and analysis, taking into account that nothing is established on this subject.
Fifth, for the synchronization of the events arising from the geographical distribution of the surviving descendants of the flood. A more universal vision is applied than that applied to the distribution by clans of the descendants of Noah. It is a vision more compatible with that described in the Sumerian texts, according to which the geographical distribution gave rise to the main original civilizations of the present-day ones: the Sumerian, the Egyptian, and the Indus. It is noteworthy that this alternative version accommodates the theory that considers the descendants of Cain to be the inhabitants of the territories called the other side of the oceans, that is, the Americas, both in the antediluvian era and in the post-flood era, when some survivors remained in the high mountains near a great lake.
6. Finally, but most importantly, this aspect has to do with the identification of the divine entity involved in the successive events of humanity's destiny. In this regard, the reconciliation of the events before the flood described in both the Sumerian texts and in Genesis can be simplified by accepting the existence of a single divine entity that forged the course of humanity.
However, the intervention of entities known as sons of God or mediating angels must also be accepted, who in the eyes of men are seen with divine characteristics and generate polytheism or paganism that was the undeniable protagonist of much of the history of men.
Only the advent of forced and violent evangelization and preaching of both Christianity and Islam into the extinction of paganism in current Western civilization. For this reason, the synchronization of events in this alternative history will accommodate the intervention of these sons of God, who generated and still generate religious wars between clans or factions of men.
In any case, this reinterpretation of the biblical texts invites us to recognize God as the sole creator and Lord of all things, a recognition that makes us see the world not as the result of blind fate, but as the realm created by God in which to fulfill his covenant with humanity.
7th, the same Microsoft Excel tool designed and used for the development of the official synchronic history is used for the development of the alternative synchronic history, reinterpreted Genesis, but with a temporal scope that goes from the currently estimated date for the origin of the universe to the present day, and a territorial scope of up to 20 regions and our civilizations of the world. 8th, in this video, we include a sample extract of the events compared between 3 regions: America, Sumeria, and Egypt, which include all the events before the flood and some more up to the 2nd millennium BC. All the variations you want to compare in terms of number of regions or temporal scope up to the present day can be obtained from the program. The file with the full version of Alternative Synchronous Universal History Genesis Reinterpreted will be published on the culturahistorica.org portal, from where it can be downloaded directly to devices equipped with the Excel program, which, although a technical tool, is perfectly organized for those new to this subject but passionate about history, whose comments and observations we would greatly appreciate.
We also invite you to watch below a short video presentation of our new Synchronous Universal History, the New Universal History, Alternative, Genesis Reinterpreted. A new history synchronized with ancient religious and ancestral texts, and also synchronized with the current advanced level of scientific knowledge.
Attention, history enthusiasts. We are relaunching our new digital tool, designed and thought especially for you, researchers, students, and history enthusiasts. Are you passionate about discovering the great events that have marked humanity? Do you want to learn more about ancient and modern civilizations? Then this tool will be your place. We have compiled a huge database with the most important events in history, which have shaped the world we live in, from the origins of humanity to the present day. All events are perfectly ordered and synchronized, as if you were leafing through a great book of history. If you like to review and study history, if you want to learn more history, and also at the same time, make history, by writing history or by proposing your own version of history, then, in any of these cases, you can use this tool that we have called Synchronous Universal History, SUH. Welcome. Let's make history. Given the vast temporal scope of the events we've considered, from the dawn of humanity to the present day, and the significant number of regions and civilizations studied, 20, our SUS is merely intended to be a historiographical skeleton supporting this initial version of universal history. In other words, we've started with a printed model or pattern with numerous blank spaces that can be filled in at discretion, but controlled by the methodology employed to present events through synchronized comparative tables. Our goal is to gradually develop a reference book with a more complete and accurate universal history. Thus, our most important objective is to make the HUS a living and constantly evolving tool, enriched by the contributions of a group of enthusiasts whom we invite you to join in the construction of a great work. The history of humanity is the history of the rise and fall of empires, which have been a defining force in shaping the course of human civilization. These empires, built on the foundations of conquest and technological superiority, particularly in weaponry, have left a lasting legacy as both drivers of progress and sources of oppression and suffering for large segments of the populations they dominated. Our tool provides a unique perspective on the historical dynamics of empires, allowing us to compare their trajectories, analyze their strengths and weaknesses, and understand the factors that contributed to their rise and fall. By examining these patterns, we can gain valuable insights into the enduring challenges and opportunities facing societies today. Our tool, Synchronous Universal History, SUH, created in Excel, is perfect for historians who seek to explore, visualize, and analyze data without technical complications. We have designed a user-friendly interface to simplify the analysis and comparison of historical events from different regions, but introducing a main feature, which is synchronization between them. Thanks to macros, complex tasks are automated, allowing to compare events, dates, and regions quickly and efficiently, and to carry out repetitive tasks with just the push of a button. Finally, ways of interacting have been designed to propose corrections and additions to the database of events, thus completing a simple interface to be able to concentrate on studying, analyzing, and mostly writing history. To learn about our Synchronous Universal History SUH, you can download the Excel file directly to your computer from DAKS, the link that you find in the description of this video.
Download the HUS now on a computer or device enabled with the Excel program. First, download the video. Instructions for use of the SUH, link you find in the description of this video. Download now the Excel file, Synchronous Universal History zozo.xlsm, link you find in the description of this video. Follow the instructions in the instructional video and start getting to know the pages of the book. You can compare events by region and by time periods easily. Very soon you will be writing and making history.